All right, thanks everybody for coming. My name's Justin Grote. Thank you for coming to PSConfEU. I'm very happy to have you all here. Thanks for your time. Just a reminder that at this conference, the organizers want to remind you that masks are required when in the meetings. Thanks for keeping everybody safe. Really appreciate it. So today we're going to be talking about optimizing VS Code for PowerShell. This is sort of part of a series that seems to be becoming. So if you saw the session syllabus, you can take that, kind of wad it up and throw it away because it's going to be totally different. I didn't get a chance to change it. Sorry about that. But we're going to be going through all kinds of neat little tips and tricks for Visual Studio Code, have some Q&A to go through some things, and then hopefully we'll have one final presenter at the end. Again, I want to thank very much the sponsors here for PSConfEU. They make this possible. These are all great companies. They can really help your organizations. Definitely recommend checking them out. And again, thank you very much to my company, Ally Digital, for sponsoring my travel. Ally Digital is a multinational MSP, Fortune 500 partners. We do all kinds of stuff. We do lots of really good stuff involving a lot of PowerShell that saves us thousands of hours. And so if you're looking for an MSP partner, definitely check them out. Again, my name's Justin Grote. I've been a PowerShell user for about 15-ish years, a little bit before Exchange 2007. That's about when I really got into it because I did a lot of Exchange installs and I really got into it then. And now a 3-year Microsoft MVP, thankfully, Data Center Solutions Architect, as I mentioned. I'm sort of a VS Code contributor. Sydney is always very kind to mention me, although I kind of basically just triage issues and I wrote one feature. So if you debug in the newest version of the Visual Studio Code, you'll notice the variable pane is a little bit nicer. I wrote that and I'm happy about it, but that's about as good as I've got. It only took me like 5 years of practice and learning C# and stuff to get to the point of being able to do that, but I'm still pretty happy about it. So. I also wrote my own VS Code extension for Pester Tests, and we'll go into a little bit about that today because even though it is pretty early, it's got a lot of bugs. It's my first thing I ever wrote in TypeScript, but I'm pretty proud of it, and it can really help you even in its current state. And for everything I do, it pretty much shows up either on my GitHub or in my Gists, which we'll talk about what Gists are in a minute if you're not familiar with them. So basically everything's there. And then at the bottom, the slides and everything I'm going to have are going to be there. They're currently sitting in a draft pull request. I'll make some final updates and then they'll show up there. So again, that same link, that github.com/psconfeu that you saw at the keynote, there'll just be a folder with my name in it and all my presentations will be in there. And that's my Twitter handle. I put all kinds of stuff out there. Whenever I make something new, it goes up there, it goes in the Gists. So previously, I've done a couple previous presentations on optimizing Visual Studio Code. First one was for the remote PowerShell Summit that was sort of like the PWSH 24. In that, I go through a lot of the different settings that exist and kind of talk about my preferences on them, on, off, highly recommend that. Part 2 I did at PowerShell Summit. This was talking all about a lot of the different extensions, including the PowerShell extension pack, which I made, that I recommend you use. But unfortunately, we only have a half hour, so I don't have time to go through that whole arc, but I definitely recommend you check those out. This is not an intro to VS Code, so I'm going to skip over anything. So if you've never seen VS Code before, this is still a good place to be, but don't feel overwhelmed. You're in a safe place. We're here for questions, and I'm always around. If you see something you want to see, but you're still using ISE, or you want to maybe talk about it some more, I'm around the conference. You can get help, and I'm extroverted, so come and see me. All right, and, whoops, I went too fast. So let's go. No more slides. We don't care about that. So let's just get into it. So I very much had a good time at the Seattle PowerShell Summit, and one of the things, though, is you get the feedback, and I always appreciate everybody's feedback. Everybody's so kind. They give me all kinds of great information. But there's always the one feedback, and, of course, that's the one that always sticks in your craw. Everybody's so nice. One person said, your presentations are kind of rambling. They kind of go here, they go there. And I'm like, okay, that's a fair criticism. I probably need to work on that. So we have this thing called Github Gists. So Gists are basically like little things that you can go out and edit in GitHub. And VS Code has a very nice extension where you can work with those just without ever leaving VS Code. One of the things that they have is this is just made by a really great author. And he has a thing where we have one gist that's just for scratch notes, where you can just put anything in there. So I just made this little agenda thing here. So we see this agenda that we have here, and I'll hide my PowerShell there. So what we have here is we have something that's Markdown. And so that's kind of strange looking Markdown. You may not have seen this before. Who here has heard of Mermaid before? Yeah, that's about what I expected. So Mermaid is fairly new. And so what's kind of neat about Mermaid is that we're really used to Markdown being documentation. It's great for our documentation. It talks about all these things. But the one thing that I found is that one kind of thing is that they've added this thing where you can now basically make diagrams in VS Code. And what's nice is that because it's in Markdown, it's pretty easy to read. I haven't even shown you anything yet. What do you think this is? Anybody want to tell me? It is. It's a Gantt chart, hence the Gantt. This is because everybody says I'm so disorganized with my presentations. Fine, I made a Gantt chart for my presentation. So we'll go ahead and open the preview here, and there it is. Except my time frames are way off. Whoa. I bet it's because of the 5 p.m. that I messed up here. Oh, did I start that right? Okay, well, regardless. There's my Gantt chart. Ta-da! So you can see here we have our intro. We got 5 minutes we're going to talk about Gists and Mermaid. We're going to talk about editor commands. We're going to talk about Pester Tests. I got one more thing, and then we're done with that section. We'll have Q&A, and then I'll pass it over to our next presenter, Spock. So the way that this works is I'm going to go ahead and open that preview again. And so the way that this works is it's just like any other kind of Markdown. And so you should be somewhat familiar with Markdown if you're doing any kind of documentation. And so you can go through here and it's just got these different sections. So now I'm done with my intro. I can just change this to done. And I bet it's because I have these crits in here. So now I've changed that to done. You see that intro went gray. And normally this is scaled correctly, but I got my time frame screwed up. I don't know what's going on there. But as you can see, you got that. Maybe if I just take this guy out, let's try that. I'm already rambling. I'm failing miserably. Let's try 5 p.m. Nope, still bad. Okay, well, whatever. But you get the idea. So that you can go through here, and so you can use this to make Gantt charts. You can use it to make user flow stories. There's all kinds of things you can do there. And as you make the changes, this Gist tool will automatically, whenever I save, it's a little slow because it's going over the Wi-Fi to then save out there. And so if I go to my GitHub out here, and again, just Gist, if I get to this thing right here, just don't worry about this magic. This is just getting out to the Gist without going to the raw thing. You'll see that GitHub will actually render what you made in Markdown. And this isn't just in Gist. This works anywhere on GitHub. So, and I believe they're adding support to Azure DevOps as well. So for any of your documentation, you can now make all kinds of different kind of diagrams. You can make user stories. You can make function call hierarchies. You can make flow charts. And it's all done. You don't have to use a tool like Visio or something and then save an SVG that's not obvious. You have it in very easy to read Markdown that anybody, you can generally get an idea of what's going on here. I set a title. I don't want a today marker. For my axis, I wanted the minutes, %m, and then you just sort of set up this table. And you can use emojis. If you don't know this, you can get Windows period and get a whole bunch of lists of different emojis you can just stick in there and they'll just show up. And so this is just a great tool for doing those kind of actions. So it looks like I'm pretty good on my timer. See, look at this. I'm so organized. Can you believe this? This is so great for me. So I'm ahead of time. So let's go ahead and move on. We'll move on to our next 5-minute section of editor commands. So Patrick, who recently joined, they mentioned him in the team. Patrick, also known as Seemingly Science on Twitter, one of the most brilliant guys I know in terms of understanding PowerShell from the very low level. He's a great C# guy. He's recently joined the team and is making all kinds of these great improvements to Visual Studio Code, especially in the PowerShell area. One I want to show here real quick. All the auto completions and stuff are really good, but if I just want to make something if I want to do a string new, we'll see if it shows up here, if I've got the right extension. You'll notice this is a lot more nicely highlighted now than it used to be. So if you're on the preview extension, he's gone through and he's rewritten these so that they have much nicer highlighting. They even tell you, if you're using a special namespace, it'll give you, the using namespace if you want to put it at the top, so you don't have to put all system.text.namespace stuff. And all of the, if you type items, then you get all the IntelliSense for it too. So if I do a string, I don't really need to do it that way. If I do $x equals test, now, $x will now have full autocomplete for all these. And this works for PowerShell classes now too. So if you make a PowerShell class, just to reference something, if you have an object that you want to use, all this IntelliSense now works by referencing that PowerShell class. So you can make it so you can make really nicely structured objects, say you have a certain kind of data or a JSON response that comes in, rather than having to guess what the properties are, as long as you have some kind of class that either comes from a library or a PowerShell module or a PowerShell class, as long as you have the item typed to that class, you can now reference all those properties and methods, and all the autocompletion works, and IntelliSense works for it. So really awesome improvements. Highly recommend checking those out. And it's gotten to the point that it's really bad. If you look at my most recent Gist, I get asked, do you have a C# background? I'm like, no. It's because when I look at your stuff these days, you have all this crap in here of all these namespaces and all these things in here. And, everything's being typed and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, yeah, because the nice thing is I come down here to telemetry configuration and I've already got, look at all this autocompletion on a .NET type that has all the nice pretty things over here. And then on that one, it comes along for the next one. So if you start typing your things like this and adding the type onto it to make it so that it's a particular thing, then VS Code can now really pick up on that and give you a lot better IntelliSense. And also, if you haven't noticed, if you haven't used VS Code lately, it's really fast now. So it's much faster than it used to be, much more reliable. The key thing, though, is to remember that you have to have your integrated console open. If you do like a sleep 30 like this, it'll stop working. Like, you lose your IntelliSense because it requires that console to be active to do things. So if you've ever had a problem where you feel like the IntelliSense is slow, that kind of thing, just make sure your console's not locked as far as the PSIC. It has to do with the way that PowerShell works and just the architecture of PowerShell. That's just one of those things you just have to remember. So if you're making a switch from ISC, et cetera, to start using VS Code, et cetera, just make sure this isn't paused, because if you're like, my IntelliSense doesn't work, this is the first thing you should check. Just make sure it's open and make sure it's not doing anything. And then your IntelliSense should be totally fine. All right. So how are we doing? I got to check that off my agenda? I forgot to check off the first thing. Let's do the preview again. I want it down here. You go down here. Come on. Come on, you know you want to. There you go. Close enough. So all right, we got the Gists and Mermaid done. And I haven't even gotten into editor commands, but I got some buffer, so we're looking good. All right, so editor commands. So the reason I brought up Patrick and went off on one of my rants, as I usually do, is that Patrick made this thing called Editor Command Services Suite. And I don't know if I have that up here. So this thing here. So what this is this is sort of an extension for VS Code. It's not really like an extension you install, but it's a module that you download and put into VS Code as a PowerShell module. And it ties into the existing PowerShell editor services, which is sort of like the engine that runs the PowerShell extension, and kind of gives you all these extra things we typically call like code lens and refactor abilities that really help enhance the tool. And I'll show one that's probably going to be really helpful to a lot of people if you haven't seen this before. So if do I have there it is. So here's a pretty typical PowerShell command that, in this case I don't have, but, goes off the screen. So, what are the different ways we can fix this? We can put in backticks. I hate you if you do, but you can do that. We can maybe shorten some of the things. We can, try putting in quotes. There's lots of things. But we also do this thing called splatting. Everybody know what splatting is in PowerShell? Okay, good. If you don't know what splatting is, you're about to see what it is. So a typical thing is that, we like to have our code more vertical for a lot of reasons. It's easier to read. It's much easier to set breakpoints on it, especially when you start using VS Code. Like if you have a long line like that, where do you put the breakpoint? You can't. But if it's vertical, it's really easy to just put a breakpoint at this particular place and stop to figure out what's going on there. So once you install this editor command suite, I'll just go psedit $profile to show you this. You just add this one, you just install the module, and then you just put this in your profile, which basically does that little integration thing that I talked about. And then you do one more thing. You go into your keyboard shortcuts, and this is all in that README that I showed. You go into your keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to show the JSON version. There's a nice version of this too, but I'm just going to show this version. So you can bind a key to this command that's PowerShell show additional commands. And this when part is optional, but that basically says I only want this command to work when I'm in a PowerShell window, because otherwise it opens your external terminal. So you can make these contextual keyboard shortcuts. I talked a lot about that in Seattle. You can go watch that presentation for more about that. So now that I have this shortcut here, I can go to a file that I have, select my thing, and do that Control-Shift-C. And now suddenly I get this list of things I can do. So I have these code lenses. So one thing I can do is I can splat command. And of course it broke it and didn't do it right. Let's try that again. I've had this one kind of go weird on me sometimes. Let's restart my. It's probably that, you're right. It's not, it sometimes has a couple things about the AST, but let's try that again. We will splat command. There we go. So as you see, it took that command that had all those different parameters and automatically splatted it for you. Because one of the most annoying things is refactoring these and writing them. And sometimes you make mistakes. There you go in one step. You got a way to take your command and make it splatted. And now you have a nice splat here. If you have, thank you. But that's not my work. That's Patrick's work. But I'm happy to show it because it's pretty cool. It'll save you a lot of time and it'll get you more comfortable with using splats. Because you can do that, and then again, a splat you can always go ahead and once you have the splat, you can have conditional stuff where you can say if if force, you can go ahead and add another parameter to this thing. Dot force equals or true, And so you can go ahead and get that. And so that's the nice thing about splats. They give you that kind of conditional stuff, but this is a nice way to do refactoring. And there's all kinds of stuff in there, and the refactorings are conditional. So if I go through and undo that real quick, we will do our thing here. So you have things you can surround it. You can change like quotes. If you want to extract it into a function, I want this to be in an inline function, get my stuff. So it'll automatically make you a function and put that in there. So there's just a couple quick examples because I don't have that much time, but definitely check that out. And I'm hoping one of the next community contributions I can do, because again, I don't work for Microsoft. The stuff that I do for the PowerShell extension is because I just decided to make something one day and they accepted my pull request. So hopefully one day I'll be able to make a pull request for this where for any kind of code that you have, give you that little light bulb icon and be able to do these kind of refactors that way, sort of the built-in way in VS Code. So hopefully we'll get there. It might be something I get to do, but we will see not. So let's go back to my agenda. All right, I got to mark that one off. This is good. How are we doing? We're doing good. We're on time. This is so weird for me. I got to take in the highs. All right, so let's move on to Pester Tests. So, we've done to death about Pester Tests. We talked about all the great contributions that have been made, despite the personality of the guy who makes it. I'm just kidding. I love Jakob. I just spent a week in Prague with him. The two things I've learned, he's a lovely man, and he's not to be trusted if you ask him how to pronounce something, because he will lie to you. When you're doing Pester Tests, if you've done this before, we'll go ahead and select. I'm going to open up a Gist that I have here. So I have a Gist out here. And if you don't know, Gists are also repositories, so you can take any, I say Gist, but it's Gist. I like GitHub, Gist. I like Gists sometimes more. But any one of these you can make. So these are just, if I just go ahead and, where's my copy GitHub URL? So these Gists are just things where if you just go to like that site that I told you, these are just like little one-off things. Like they're not good enough to be a module, but I don't want to also make a whole separate repository for them and set up CI. They're just throwaway things that I want to make to check out. So I got things like, a way to grant local admin access to a virtual machine. I got a way to skip changes in a what if thing because there's a lot of noise in there. Just lots of various things in here. But every one of these is actually, this is entirely its own Git repository. So it has version control and all that kind of stuff, and you can actually check them out. So when you right click here, you can choose clone repository and check out that repository and then work with that Gist as if it was any other project. And there's a lot of good advantages to that. Like if you just have something quick, you can export it and then promote it to a repository. But I'm just showing just an example here of just working within. So I have this little function that I made called select string match. And what it does is it lets you very simply just take a few different things. I'll just go ahead and copy path. We'll just load that in. And we'll take one of my examples here. It's basically a really simple way to do matching on strings. Now, this is not the important part of the presentation. It's just something that exists where you can say, rather than have to do do a dash match and then figure out the matches and do all that kind of stuff and have all this boilerplate code with for each object loops, this sort of simplifies that process for you. So you can have a string where it says this part doesn't matter, this does A, this does B, this does not matter. Select string and there's a regex which just says, it looks for the part that says this does dot. And whatever matches that regex is what gets passed through the pipeline and everything else gets thrown away. And so that's when you just do a select string and then select string match, and then you'll get those results. So just a really simple way to get at what's in select string when you want just the matches of things as opposed to the entire lines, when you just want the individual matches. So you can grab that code, throw it out. But in my documentation here, this is going to be hopefully there. So the first thing is the function itself is about that big. The help is this big. This is how every function should be. You should have 3 times as much documentation as you have your actual function. And the reason that is because we want people who use it to be discoverable, easy. And so I have a lot of examples in here as far as how it works, what it does, but I want to make sure that these examples actually work. I don't want to send them out to people. So I'm going to use a Pester test. And because my examples, basically what's nice is I can use my examples as my unit tests because those go together really well. I'm showing somebody how to do something as an example. That's a really good unit test to be hey, I'm going to show somebody how to work the tool. Why don't I just actually make that a test to make sure it actually works that way? So if I go and break my code, if I go and add a feature, it's oh crap, I broke this example that somebody's going to try to use in the new version and suddenly it stops working and I didn't know because I was working on something completely different in that code block. So I make a pester test, and I'm just going to assume most people have maybe seen a pester. If not, it's not that complicated. This is pester 5 syntax. But what we have here is you describe like a general set of tests. Before every test, or before anything runs, I want to dot source in my command so that now I have it so that I can test with it. This is called a setup or a fixture. They got all kinds of highfalutin terms for this kind of thing, but it's just setup. So then once I have that, then I can just do my tests. And tests don't have to be complicated. It's simply that it does this. This should look familiar. It's the exact same thing I just showed. And it's just take that, and then that should be the result. Like, you don't have to like test for exceptions. This can be your test. Like, you have an input, you expect an output, you want to make sure that they match. So what my extension, and if you do pester tests, we'll just do invoke pester here. And we'll run our tests, and our tests pass. Great. Let's do invoke pester, I think detailed, well, I can't remember what it is, output detailed. Okay, there is a little bit more detailed thing. So I got my 4 examples. They each work. The tests are pretty fast. That's great. So, but I don't want to have to go to the command line type invoke pester every time I want to run a test. So I made an extension here. VSCode added this whole thing called a testing API, and it ties right into it. So as you can see here, the tests that are over here are automatically discovered over here. And this works in real time. So if I add a new test, and save it, there's example 5, just showed up over there on the right. And every time you make a change, you saw it ran the tests. So if I go to my code and I go to select string match, and let's just go ahead and just for fun, get way down here. I'm just going to do throw oops. Save that in there. All right, let's try running my tests again. No surprise, all the tests broke. So I can go to each test, and I can see what happened. So here's my test, and it's like, oh, it broke there. And you can go ahead and add in like a breakpoint, and then try debugging this test. And it'll take you right to that point. You can see where you're at. You can see, this is an extension Inline Variables, which I don't have time to talk about, but it'll show you like all your current statuses of your variables, so you can kind of very easily see where you're at. And then in your debugger, you have your variables view, and if you've used older versions of VS Code, this probably looks a little different. You're welcome. I wrote that. I'm very happy of it. If I haven't mentioned it before, I'm going to mention it like 3 more times because I'm super proud of it. And things like hash tables look much nicer. Things like arrays look much nicer. A bunch of crap gets hit under raw view here. And so, okay, I know that's where my problem is. And I can take that, I can take it back out, fix my code, go back to my tests, and then run them again. And they're good. Hooray. So if you use pester, this is a great way to just have it all there without having to do all kinds of back and forth, running invoke pester, that kind of thing, and seeing them as you make the changes. And so as you make changes to tests, they automatically show up. So let's go ahead and change this test, save that, and oh, my test broke. Well, where did my test break? And you'll see there's also little icons over here. So you can do all the run and debug over here. So I can go peek error. It's like, where did this fail? And so what you get is this really nice view that says, hey, we expected this does A and this does B, but the script actually output this does A, this does B, this does C. So you can get a really quick view, and you can also see the history of tests that happened. Like, so you can see here it was fine, here's all those oops that happened before, here's other times I ran it that nothing happened, and you can also get like the detailed, like what the pester looked like when it ran, if you want to see that command line view of it. So really, really handy, really helps with doing pester testing and just getting that information right there, as opposed to having to get the context, try to figure out where it is from the command line information. This all just ties directly into the VS Code API. All right, let's check another thing off. I got 7 minutes. I think I'm doing pretty good. Until I can't find the thing and I spend 5 minutes just looking for it. You know what? This is what the recent is for. There we go. No, actually, no, I know where it is. Go back to my little scratch notes here. And we'll do our preview. And this agenda is still screwed up. It worked on my machine right before the presentation, so you're just going to have to take my word for it. I bet I could fix it, but if we have time, we'll try to fix it. How's that? So I got my presentation here. It's looking good. We're going to go ahead and mark Pester Tests as done. Put these commas in there. There. Oh, there we go. Hey! Ta-da! Must have had a missing comma in there. So as you can see there, so now we're going good. We got that. And I think we do have time for one more thing. So there is an extension. If you're working on things, you got a document that you're working on. I kind of like to do this with my settings. My settings look pretty good. Okay, I got a couple warnings, couple problems. That's fine. But like, I make a mistake. I've got Error Lens, nice extension that kind of lets you know right away there's problems. I got the thing down here. I don't feel like that's not, sometimes I need something like a little more pressure. I need something that's a little more aggressive. So there is this extension called In Your Face. So this extension, who recognizes who this is? That's the Doom guy. That's right. So I don't have any errors right now, but if I make a mistake, this is not good. Oh man, I can't handle the stress. I can't handle the stress. It's getting worse. Oh, he's not having a good time. Let's get rid of a few more commas. It's not looking good. I don't think that's okay. I don't think I'm allowed to put an X here. Missing a few more. Oh, I'm getting into the grays now. He's having a real hard time. So yeah, just like VSCode pets, if you see from Summit, that is in your face, little fun thing to kind of see it. Of course, we can go through, go back, fix it. It's okay, dude, it's okay. Oh, okay, we're back to good. We're back to safe, So if you want to get your, really scare off your interns from making mistakes, there you go, you got that. So that's the time that I have. I got about 4 minutes extra. I'm really proud of myself. I could go into about 15 other things, but I think I'll go ahead and open it up for Q&A now before I turn it over to the next presenter, Spock. So, yes?
So with your Pester Tests,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed in the selection there that you have your test show up right under the actual.
Oh, yeah, okay.
How does that work? Where is the test located in the same folder as your files, or is it
Sure. So the question was, if you look at my file explorer over here, you'll notice that my test is actually nested under my file there. And this is something that I demoed it's in the previous video. This is a thing called file nesting that was added, I think, 2 versions ago. So this is done with a simple setting. So it's in the same folder. Like, I'll show you the folder structure here real quick. Let me open an Explorer. So the file's just next to it. It's just right there. It's nothing different. But VS Code had this nice thing where they added a feature where you can do this thing called file nesting. So if I go to my settings JSON, find it here, nest it. I need Doom guy up here so I don't mess it up again. Nesting, file nesting. Okay. Oh, see, I have my experimental settings here. There's the real ones. So this lets you basically define these patterns. So you enable it with the command, just file nesting true, and then you define these different patterns. So there's a lot of them that are built in, but basically you say for this pattern, star.ps1, take whatever the star is. So in my case, it's select string match. Take that star, and then if there's anything that matches this other pattern, so in this case, it would be select string match.tests.ps1, which this matches, then nest it under that file. So it works for all kinds of different things. I do it with my, this example doesn't have it, but like my PSD1 and my PSM1, I nest my PSM1 under my PSD1 so that I just see, because I never touch the PSM usually. Once it's done, it's just an entry point. But like you're able to nest that. You can nest all kinds of configs. Like I like to nest, there's different styles of doing your tests. Some people like a separate tests folder. I do that for my integration tests, but for when I'm just doing unit tests, I like to have the file in the same folder as the item. And so being able to nest it like this is really nice because I can just very quickly see what I've changed and go to the test that's related and even, right click it and split it to the right. And now I can see my test next to my code. Obviously, usually I do this in much tighter, much smaller font. But you have this here and there. So yeah, so that's what that is. That's a thing called file nesting. That's a newer feature in VS Code. And yeah, it's pretty simple to enable. It's not enabled by PowerShell by default. It could be a PR. I could look into maybe making a thing where we have recommended nestings and you could choose to turn them off or turn them on. So yeah, that's what that is. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? I can talk about anything in VS Code. We got plenty of time here. The icons in Markdown, yes. So the question was, when I was writing my Markdown, let's go back to my agenda, I had these nice little icons here in the Markdown. So these are called emojis. I mean, if you know what an emoji is, it's the same Unicode thing. So what's nice is that, it used to be like you did, and if you try to show these in PowerShell 5, they might freak out. But PowerShell 7, they usually show up just fine. Oh, see, now I've really freaked it out. Let's just restart here. So some things don't quite show up in the terminal, right? But at least as far as VS Code, it has full Unicode support. So if you hit Windows period, I should have turned on my screen. Actually, I wonder if it'll show up if I turn on the screen. I should have had this on to begin with. I'm sorry. I cannot type. Screencast mode. So if you do Windows period, no, it didn't show it. Okay. Screencast mode usually shows you like all kinds of stuff that's going on. So sorry about that. But if you do Windows period, it'll bring up this sort of emoji keyboard. And you can go here and you can get them all as symbols. And you can search for them. Like you can search for thumbs up. And then if you click it, it'll go ahead and type it in. So, you know, the quick lesson of you, yeah. Sorry? Yeah.
I use emoji in Markdown, but I put in the raw Unicode.
Oh yeah, you probably do you like the backtick U something whatever? Yeah, both ways work. This doesn't. So the question was, do you require a VS Code extension for this? No, this is native VS Code stuff. So even if this wasn't the Mermaids thing that you're seeing here, like this just works in normal Markdown. If I just say like my presentation, it went pretty well. Thumbs up, checkbox. Just pick a bunch here just for fun. So I'm going to save this, and when I save it in the background, that Gists tool, it might take a second to save because of the Wi-Fi. Okay, so in the background, what that did is it transparently went and uploaded my gist. But like this works if it was just a local Markdown. So if I preview it, see, it's just right there. So this works with any Markdown. So like if you want to add symbols, that kind of thing. You can do lots of places too. If you look at my, maybe we can, how are we doing on time? We're good. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question was, what did I enable to show the things on the keyboard? So there's a lot of tools that do this. One's called Karnak, but if you're only doing things in Visual Studio Code, there's a built-in tool for it. So I'm just doing the magic key, Control-Shift-P or F1. This is Google for VS Code. If you don't know the shortcut, it is the shortcut you should know first and foremost. Either F1, Control-Shift-P. Burn that into your memory. Control-Shift-P, F1, or whatever the Mac equivalent is. I'm sorry, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I usually use Control FP because that was the original. And there's things the question was about, there was a comment that when you add keyboard shortcuts in VS Code, things like F1 might get overwritten from the terminal. There are actually ways to adjust that. So you can say like you can make the terminal one take precedence. But by default, like F1 is going to have this, whereas if you want it in the terminal, you know, it might override. So there's a lot like my F1 that I don't have in this demo instance, but like my F1, if I have if I type like, git item and I hit F1 on it, it'll actually open up a browser window and show me the help on the PowerShell website for that. I have an editor command for that I'll put in the chat. But anyhow, sorry. So tangent done. Subroutine complete. Move back up the stack to the next function, which was how does the screencast thing work? It's this option here, toggle screencast mode. And so you just turn that, I just turned it back off. But if you do toggle screencast mode, then what it'll do is whenever you click, or did I just turn it off again? No, it was on. So whenever you do like, a shortcut, it'll show it on the screen for you. So this is great for little screencasts, like batteries included. Like you don't have to learn Karnak, you don't have to learn any of those other tools. It's just right there for screencast. It'll usually show a little circle where you click, as you can see. So real handy for screencasts, adds a bunch of little things. Built into VS Code, super easy. Okay, yeah, I got all kinds of other stuff over here. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to show while we're here, specifically VS Code related. I would say, there was a slide that I forgot to make that we can cover a little time here. And what we'll do is basically like, how do I learn all this? Like, how do I find this stuff? There's two main sources that I find this stuff. There's the VS Code release notes. If you go to VS Code, every time there's a new release, they have excellent release notes. They tell you everything that's going on. Here's all the new stuff. They give you demos. They give you GIFs. This new deprecated extension thing, like, oh, great, I have an idea for this. I can make this work. And so they're really good about telling you all the new stuff that's going on. Like in the last release, Explorer file nesting. So the thing you asked about, yeah, you may not have seen this because it's really new. But right here, you can go right in the release notes. They'll explain to you how it works. They'll show you a default. I need those little subtitles. I wonder if you can even keep up with me. I'll break its processor. You can go ahead and so they explain all the stuff that I explained about file nesting right there. So yeah, great. Highly recommend those. Like most of my tips just come out of these notes. And I use insiders day to day. So I'm showing the demo of VS Code stable. I use insiders like as my primary. Insiders and PowerShell preview, like they're both pretty stable. They very rarely break on me. And I'm able to kind of like try out the features and offer feedback and that kind of stuff before they come out. And what's great, like Sydney said, if you use those, you're able to help give feedback to the team so that you can be in there helping shape what it looks like. And so I highly recommend you use them after you're pretty comfortable with them. They're both pretty stable and they usually have much nicer features. Like there's a lot of new IntelliSense stuff that's only in the preview extension right now that's available. So I have this, and then there's a couple others. So I really recommend this channel, Code 2020. This is done by the guy who made the GistPad extension. And he has all these different tips that are just constant. How do you turn off animations? The indent rainbow extension, which is one of my absolute favorite extensions, especially if you work with things like YAML and other white space specific languages. You know, toggling inlay hints, which doesn't really matter in PowerShell, although we might be able to get that as a feature. There's file hits, here's file nesting right here. So it'll tell you all about it, show you how to do it, that kind of thing. So another great resource to get hints about what is going on in the environment. All right. So with that, I will thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to our next presenter, Spock. Oh, and once this gets up here, oh, I hit the wrong, I knew I was going to do that. I always forget to hit Shift F5. It's like one of my biggest cardinal sins here. So I skipped a couple slides. Did it again. I'm bad at this. Why did they even let me on the stage? All right. I'm going to do it third time's the charm. Ta-da. I give up. Yeah. There we go. All right. So here's, I have a wall of references. Again, this will be on the GitHub. You don't really need to take too much of a photo of this because you just get photos of text. These aren't links to show. The reason I did that is like the presentation will be in the GitHub, and all of these will be clickable links. These are all kinds of references, the extension pack, all that stuff. The links to the videos are direct links on the first slide for my previous 2 sessions. And then of course, in your face, very important extension. I recommend you install right away. For Doom guy, put that in right there. If you want, you can get like the Incredibles guy too, whereas like he slowly gets darker. Like you got that option too. So we did the Q&A. So I turn over to our featured speaker, Spock. This is my dog. This is Spock's guide to being a very good boy at PSConfEU. They were very kind. He was hoping to make it, but unfortunately Spock travels worse than Adam Driscoll does. So this is, yeah. So important point number 1, make sure you stay hydrated. It's very important when you're here in Vienna. It's very hot. Make sure you stay hydrated. It's very important. While you're here, make new friends. Run around. Get to make some friends. Get messy. Get to know people. Make sure you engage in back and forth healthy debate. It's really important. We share ideas. It's okay to freak out sometimes if you need a safe space. He does this every time we give him a bath. I feel like this is his revenge when he gives us, because he'll just keep on. This goes for like 10 minutes. Yeah, you think he's done. He's not. He's going to let you know that he's unhappy. And of course, we're all here to learn. Make sure you listen patiently to others, even though they might be really annoying, like me. Always whining. If you don't like it, just keep listening. And so thank you, Spock, for making sure we're healthy. And thank you very much.